my name is Christy Durso, and I'm the owner of Incredible Memories Travel. I'm so happy to see you all here to listen to me kind of jabber on for a little bit. Again, like I said, I own Incredible Memories Travel. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my family and why I do what I do. So these are my people. We have my daughter over there. She's 20. She has 27 food allergies. She has a genetic disorder and an autoimmune disorder that caused some mobility issues for her. She is also on the spectrum. We have our youngest son next to her. He is both cognitively and intellectually disabled. And then my other son over here is 19, and he is on the spectrum as well. So the only one who doesn't have a disability in my family is my husband, and he jokes with us all the time about writing a book about being the only neurotypical person in an atypical household. And you know, I always think it's a great idea until he starts actually talking about the things that he would write about, and then I'm kind of like, hey. But it is interesting, and it is, you know, life is challenging, but it's a lot of fun. So about me, you know, I'm in a chair, that's obvious. I have, for the last 20 years, had a lot of different health issues. I got my first pacemaker when I was 24 years old. That was a shock, so literally. And then I have a couple of autoimmune diseases and a genetic disease. They were all degenerative, and about 2 years ago, they had a perfect storm, which caused me to go numb in my legs. And it was very sudden. It was 1 minute, literally. I was walking and standing, which was not always comfortable at the time, but I could do it. And the next, I was calling my husband, telling him I couldn't feel my leg. So it was just that fast that I just stopped walking. So that was about 2.5 years ago. And it's been quite an adventure, and I've had more losses since then, and it's been a real challenge. We're also a military family, so we move around. Travel is part of our life. It has to be, because we're military. And we think that travel is also important. It does something to your soul. It helps you expand your world in a very real way, learning about other cultures, learning about the differences, the way people live and the way people interact and the way people think. There's just something about it that makes you a better person when you do it. But let's be real. When you have a disability, travel is hard. There's so much to think about. You don't get to just show up at a destination and enjoy what they have. You have to think about every single little detail. So before we go into that, I want to talk about the role of a travel advisor, whether it's me or anybody else. Everybody knows it's super easy to get on the internet and click submit on Hotwire or Expedia or Orbitz or anything else. That's really easy. You can do your own research and you can book travel. It's not terribly difficult to do. The problem with that, and we saw this last year with the pandemic, is then you're on your own. That's it. That hotel doesn't know you, that brand doesn't know you. You're just another number for them. The role of a good travel advisor is that we cultivate relationships with our partners that we use. We travel extensively and we build relationships so that when you travel using us, if you have an issue, even if you don't, every client of mine gets a VIP letter to the resort that they're going to. So they know who you are before you even arrive. And if you have a disability and you require extra things upon your arrival, they already know that. You don't have to call them. You don't have to verify that they have that. I've already paved the way for you. And that's important whether you're going to an all-inclusive, if you're going overseas, wherever you're going, it's nice to know that road has already been paved for you. And then if you have a problem while you're traveling, Yes, you can go to the desk and you can deal with it, but you can also call me or your travel advisor if it's somebody else and say, hey, I'm having this issue and I need help getting it taken care of. Can you please use your contacts? And usually we're able to get somebody on the phone and get it taken care of. Are we perfect? We're definitely not. Can we fix everything? We like to think we're magicians sometimes, but we're not, so we can't always. But by using us, you've added a layer of protection to your trip. We also provide extensive trip prep help. So before you go, you'll get a packet that includes all the information that we have that'll help you when you travel. So that's the role of a travel advisor. It's not just so that we can make a commission. I want to talk about that a little bit too. We're a fee-free agency. Jamie, the other travel advisor who has been there, is also a fee-free agency, which means that you don't pay anything extra for our services. Your cost is the same whether you book direct or you use a travel advisor. And when you book direct or through Orbitz or Expedia or anywhere else, you're paying a travel agent commission whether you use one or not. They have a percentage of that sale set aside for a travel advisor, and that is then paid to the travel agent after you travel. So if you don't use one, you're paying for it, but not getting the benefit. If you do use one, you're getting all that additional benefit that we already talked about with the expertise of the travel agent and the relationships that they've cultivated and built over time in order to be able to use them. So I wanted to just kind of go over that because I get so many questions about how does using a travel advisor work? Why should I use a travel advisor? It's so easy to go book online. I like to do the research. Using a travel advisor doesn't mean you don't have to do research. It just means that you have somebody to guide you along the way. So that's kind of it for me on that issue. Now I want to talk about the importance of travel. I don't think travel is frivolous. There are certainly some parts of it are, and you can certainly do things that you don't have to spend money on, but I want to talk about why I do what I do and why I think it's really, really super important to do it. One thing I didn't mention yet, well, yeah, I did. Sorry, my husband has 22 years in the military. The military recognizes the value of R&R. They do. You know, our troops go to war. It's a very serious business. And they don't like to give us things that we don't need. There's an old joke in the military. If the military wanted you to have a family, they'd issue you one. So they don't give you things that they don't value. And the military values R&R time. The military gets 30 days of paid leave a year. We also have military-friendly military resorts that the military has invested in around the world. Why would they do that? Because they have found that when their military families take a break, when their military families take a rest, they come back better prepared to do their job. You know what I haven't seen a lot of when I go on forums for families with disabilities? I don't see people talking about taking that rest. I see, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to, where you need to go. You need to make sure you're doing this for your child. You need to make sure you're doing this for your child. It's very rare that I see people talk about the importance of rest. It's so important. When we're not rested, we're no good. We're stressed out, we snap at our families, our relationships suffer, and our physical health suffers. Rest is an important concept, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of that time. Whether it's tent camping or whether it's luxury vacations, take a rest. Plan that into your life. Make sure that you are planning downtime because it is vital to you. I joke, you know, even God rested on the seventh day. He took a break. If that was important, you know, even if you're not a believer, you can appreciate that that's been around forever, and that's something that is there. Rest is important. The military values it. it's something that we need to do. Even companies, I have a family where he's on a year-long remote trip, which means that he's away from his family for an entire year. My husband has done that. He's done a lot of deployments. Well, on that year-long trip, the military pays for that service member to come back home. And sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's a month. And so he is home right now on that R&R, and they got to have a surprise vacation, and it was just really delightful to get to plan. That's something I really love to get to do, is plan those R&R trips. So I want, really, if you don't take a vacation, if that's not something that's been part of your plan, self-care plan, I really, really want to encourage you to consider. You're all here, so you're all thinking about it, and so I'm glad for that, but it is, shift your perspective from thinking of it just as that would be nice to do to something that's important to do. Now, about some of my work, I am on the board of a company called Travelability, and we work to improve tourism boards, airports, hoteliers, airlines, understanding about accessibility. We all know the ADA is helpful, but it doesn't really humanize things. It makes a checklist that people follow, and then they say, oh, well, that's ADA standards, but not one size fits all. And oftentimes, those accommodations aren't actually that great. And I'm going to pull up a slide. Some of these photos are in the US, and some of them are not. And I want to show you, these are some various pictures of me in accessible rooms, showing kind of what it's like when it's not really accessible. They don't always have a good understanding of it, which is one of the reasons why I go to so many properties to explore, to kind of get a general idea. Well, our goal with Travelability is to talk to these resorts and explain to them how there are so many difficult things. Very often here in the States, one of the things that we see is trash cans in front of the elevator buttons. How many of you are in an accessible room and have trouble opening the door? Yeah, I understand that. I was at Universal at Royal Pacific Resort in February, and the door there was so heavy, I actually injured myself. I was there for a conference, and I missed 2 days of the conference. My husband had to take leave to come up and help take care of me because I could barely move from opening the door to my accessible room. So those are some of the things that we talk about on the Board of Travelability to help them improve, help hoteliers know where they're falling short and how they can make bigger adjustments and improve things for those of us who are traveling. So that's a little bit there, but I also go to different resorts, as I mentioned, and I test out their accessibility. There are a lot of properties that say they're accessible, and you get there and you find out what that means to them is that they've put bars in that bathroom. But how many of you want to go to a beachfront resort and sit in your room? Yeah, I didn't raise my hand either. If I go to a resort, I want to be able to explore. I want to be able to do all the things that they offer. So I'm looking for accessible bathrooms around the property. Do they have a beach wheelchair? If you're a beachfront property and your able-bodied guests are able to use that beach for free, don't you think that those of us in chairs should also be able to use the beach for free? I do. I think that's a big deal. There are a few properties, we're going to talk about them. My representative from Sandals and Beaches is actually here with me today, and I want to point them out. They have beach wheelchairs at all of their properties, and they're free for the guests to use while they're there. So there are some properties who have made some strides. How many of you have a family with a cognitive disability? How hard is it to travel with that family member? It's so hard because people don't understand. They don't know why your child is making noises. There's nobody on the staff who knows how to interact with your child or adult family member who has that disability. But you know what? there are properties that are making strides in that area. There are people who are doing that, who are going to trainings, they're reaching out, they're asking, how do we become autism friendly? How do we become friendly to those with cognitive disabilities? And again, I'm going to point it out again, Sandals and Beaches is ahead of their game. They were the first all-inclusive resort to get an autism certification by a company called IBCCES, and they do research on cognitive disabilities in general. They're not specifically for hotels and for travel, but that's their job, is to research and teach others how to do better with cognitive disabilities. And Sandals and Beaches has held that certification for years. There's another company that also certifies resorts. It's called Autism Double Checked. This one was written specifically for travel companies, and it's a wonderful company. I think it's phenomenal. And they just certified, this year, another brand of resorts. That's the only other company overseas that I know of that has even attempted to get an autism certification. So the reason I talk about Sandals and Beaches so much is because they're ahead of the game. Are there anybody else here with food allergies or a special diet? Yeah. Again, there are companies that are starting to realize the importance of accommodating those. In the last 4 months, about 4 months, I have visited 6 different brands of resorts, and all of them were able to accommodate my special diet. And I follow a very, very strict diet because otherwise I throw up and nobody wants to see that. So I follow a very strict keto diet, and every single property I went, they didn't always understand when I told them what I was able to eat, but they all were able to accommodate once I explained it. But the unique thing again, Sandals and Beaches has had a culinary concierge in place for a long time, and they sit down with you and go over all your dietary preferences, your allergies, and everything, and then they send that out to every restaurant on property so that they all know what to expect when you go to their restaurant. And they ask you, if you have a certain food that you eat, they will try to acquire that for you so that it's there when you go. And that's also great for those with cognitive disabilities, because a lot of time they have sensory issues and they won't eat certain foods. I know our youngest, especially when he was little, would just spit food right back out. And he wouldn't eat it. There were certain textures he just would not eat. And our older son has texture issues with meat, and he won't eat certain things. And I talk to families where all their child will eat is this one specific food. Well, when we work with a property, especially Sandals and Beaches, they make sure that they have that food that your child will eat or that you will eat if you have a special diet. They make sure that they have that food for you when you arrive, and you can pre-arrange that with them using me, or if you end up booking direct, you can do it directly through them prior to your arrival so that they're expecting you when you get there. So there's a lot that's going on that they're doing to make it a lot more friendly, and it's been great to kind of interact with them and to see how they're changing. And they're not perfect, none of the resorts are, but I love getting to go down there and talk to them and show them how they can improve their accessibility. And the amazing thing is, guys, they're listening. They want to change. They want to do better for us. But we have a responsibility too. When we travel, we need to make sure that we're engaging with the resort staff and letting them know where they're falling short. Tell them, sing their praises. When they do it right, please compliment them, because they need to know that they're doing it right as well. But make sure that you're letting them know, okay, this works, but this doesn't. Is there any way you can make an accommodation there? There was one room that I was in once where the path leading up to it had these gaps in between the concrete, and they didn't think anything of it. They're not in a chair. But for me, it was just, I didn't want to be going up this incline having to tilt my chair back. Big shock, right? So I told the resort staff about it, and within an hour, there were people there filling in the gaps with sand, and then they put down a carpet so that way it was completely smooth for me. So you may have something that is an issue when you arrive. If you're not communicating that, if you're just settling for it, They have no way of knowing. I cannot tell you how many times I have gone to a property and found out and talked to a resort manager and explained some of the things that are issues that are very common issues. And I know I'm not the only person traveling who is in a chair, and I know I'm not the only person with a child who has a cognitive disability or food allergies. But they look at me and they go, "We're so glad you told us that. We have never heard this before." I don't understand that. That blows my mind that it's not being talked about. Why don't these resorts know that we need a beach wheelchair? Why don't they know that a mirror that cuts us off at the forehead isn't really appropriate? Why don't they know this? If you have a disability, part of the responsibility does fall on you to communicate your needs. Now, we make that easier. Travel advisors make that easier for you because we ask you questions and we try to make sure that we have all of your needs met ahead of time. But resorts will sometimes not give us all the information, and there are things that do fall in the cracks. But if you're not speaking up, if you're not communicating when the resorts are falling short, if you're not communicating when the tours are falling short, then we have no way of knowing how to improve, how to push for those improvements. And then we end up in situations where here it is in 2021, and I'm being told that resorts are hearing this for the very first time. So work with me, help me work toward that improvement, on improving accessibility and teaching them how to make it better for us, because a lot of them just think we don't even want to travel because they don't know that really the issue is it's hard to travel. They think we're just not going because we don't want to. What they don't realize is that we really do want to. It's just really difficult because they're not meeting our needs. So that's where we need to work together to try to help them improve. And we need to begin traveling because we're not spectators. I had someone yesterday who hasn't always been in a chair, had an accident and is now in a chair and is adjusting to life in it. And I understand that because same thing for me. I'm a little bit further in my journey. But as we were talking, he said, "I just feel like a spectator." And that's so heartbreaking to me. We're not spectators in this life. We get to live life to our fullest also. We get to experience things also, but we have to help those around us see it. We have to teach those around us that we're not spectators. And we do that by getting out. We do that by traveling. We do that by opening doors. Yes, we're going to run into issues. We're going to have problems, but we shouldn't let those problems stop us. We need to keep pushing forward. We need to keep trying. We need to keep educating those around us so that they know how to make the world friendlier for us. And that's on us to help educate other people, and I will gladly help lead the way on that charge. So I do want to talk about some places that are doing a good job. Let's start a little bit closer to home. I have two pictures up here, and this is my family at Universal with my niece, and that's my family on a Disney cruise. So we've kind of gone all over the place, and starting local, let's talk about Disney a little bit. Everybody who here is familiar with the DAS system at Disney? Well, let me tell you a little bit about it, and since about half of you are. The DAS system is the Disability Assistance Service, and they were the first ones to have a program like this. It is actually not designed for mobility needs. It's designed for cognitive needs and for people who may need to leave the line quickly for IBS, bathroom issues, etc. People who can't wait in line. That's who that service is actually designed for. And it's not difficult to do. Sometimes the lines to guest services are a little bit long, so you do have to wait a little bit to get through. But once you're there, again, we're in the US, so we follow ADA laws. You request to have a disability assistance pass, and they will ask you what your need is. They do not ask for a medical diagnosis. They do not ask you for paperwork. They can't. It's against the ADA. But they can ask you what your need is, and at that time you explain what your need is. I find most people end up saying, oh, my child has autism or XYZ. They end up telling the medical diagnosis anyway, but really all you need to tell them is, I don't have the ability to wait in line. It will cause a meltdown or anything similar to that. And they will take your picture and scan the bands of everyone in your party, or if you don't have magic bands, because they're not providing those very much anymore, then you show your ticket and they scan those and add everybody in your party to it. And then you're able to wait in an alternate location. Disney has excellent disability services in their parks. They have forced the rest of the theme park industry to raise their game. Now most of the theme parks have a similar program. Universal definitely has a program, and so does SeaWorld, and so does Six Flags and Busch Gardens. They all have similar programs. None of them are as well run as Disney's, because again, Disney is a trailblazer. They started doing it first and they do the best job, but all of these parks do offer something similar. So that's really excellent. Disney is also amazing with food allergies. We have eaten everywhere, and again, as I mentioned, my daughter has 27 food allergies, so you can imagine going out to eat with 27 food allergies. It's not an easy thing. Most of the time, we're at home cooking because it's much easier. And a lot of times when you go out, they say, oh, well, we can give you a piece of meat and some bland vegetables. Not at Disney. They give you fully flavorful food. It's terrific. So we really, really enjoy going to Disney. Universal is pretty good, not quite as good as Disney. SeaWorld, same thing. But we really do find that Disney is the best out of the theme parks. So we really enjoy that. The cruising industry has really stepped up their game with disabilities. They're coming along, not perfect accessibility. Sometimes it can be hard to get an actual accessible cabin. They can't, again, require a whole lot of documentation in order to give it to you. So sometimes those fill up with people who may not actually be in a wheelchair, but use a scooter and would still be able to use a shower or whatnot. But in general, I've managed to get accessible cabins, and they are much more spacious, especially on Disney cruise lines. Their cabin is humongous and quite easy to get around. The roll-in shower is fabulous, so we really quite enjoy cruising, especially Disney. I find Disney to be the most accessible out of the big cruise lines. Penant is another cruise line. If you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend looking at it. They do a lot of interesting itineraries, and their ships are completely accessible. AMA Waterways, when you start talking about river cruising, like AMA Waterways, who is Disney's partner for Adventures by Disney, they have one ship that is completely accessible on every deck, and most of their ships are mostly accessible, but it is a little bit harder to do a river cruise because of the way that they set up at the different ports. So having some mobility is typically required on that. But there are definitely different cruises. The American river cruises are accessible. They use a bus to transport when you come on and off, and you can do that. So there are a lot of different options in the US for cruising, and also in Europe and whatnot. So there are quite a few options for doing that. And I do want to go on, we'll talk a little bit more about resorts. So some of our beach resorts and some of our excursions. So as I mentioned, we're not spectators, so I don't want to go somewhere and just stay in the resort. I want to be able to get out of my resort. I want to explore the cultures. I want to see the different things. Well, we have a partner called Will the World. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with them. I highly encourage you to look them up. They are phenomenal. The company was started from a couple of guys from South America, and they are adrenaline junkies. There's no other word for it. That's what they are, and it is amazing some of the things that they have done. Like, they have climbed Machu Picchu. How amazing is that? In Mexico, they've gone all the way into some of those underground cenotes where you have to go through those caves, and they have figured out a way to let us do it too, which I think is absolutely amazing. You can see that there, the bottom picture over there, that's in a grit wheelchair, which is what they provide when you're going on their tours. And they use that to get you through the areas that aren't really very wheelchair, where you wouldn't take a standard wheelchair or an electric chair. So they put you in that and then wheel you down. And sometimes there are people lifting it up and moving it over some of the bigger rocks, but they do it. You don't have to just be a spectator. You get to go all the way on these tours and get to do all these things, even though you're in a chair. It doesn't matter. So I got to swim with the sea turtles, and I got to go all the way into the cenotes. We went into the jungle to find the monkeys and to listen to them. And we went to the Mayan ruins, and they put me in a little cart. They had all the carts, so the regular ones had these cushions, and you could sit in them, and they pedal you all the way through the little village. They pulled my chair into a little cart and strapped it down, and we went all around, getting to hear all the same things as everyone else. You're not a spectator. You get to do all of these things. It takes a little bit more work, but you get to do it. This is your life, and you can experience as much as you want. Now, I know I have a lot of friends who love to get to a resort and just hang out on the beach, and there are a lot of activities on the beach. When I was in Turks and Caicos just a few weeks ago, I wanted to go swimming. I wanted to swim with the sea turtles. Now, their accessibility isn't fabulous anywhere in the Caribbean. It's pretty limited. But because I wanted to go, they took me. They brought me to the boat. One of the guys scooped me up and took me down to the boat. And then once we were at our location to scuba dive, snorkel, that's my next thing to talk about. They lowered me into the water, and I got to swim, and I got to see the sea turtles and eels and rays, and I got to see it all. In fact, I saw more than most of the people because I had one of the guys right there with me. He took me away from the group, and we swam this way, and I don't even know how many turtles we saw. We saw so many. And we got to see all these amazing things. There were people who came up to us and goes, "Where are you seeing sea turtles?" They're all over the place. And it was just absolutely a phenomenal experience. We get back to the boat. They help pull me out, take me back to my seat, carry me back up the beach to my chair, and that was that. If you're willing to be adventurous, if you're willing to take the risk, if you're willing to allow them to help you, you can do just about anything. How many of you know that you can scuba dive from a chair? You don't take the chair in the water, but you can get certified by PADI to dive. They have adaptive scuba diving, and Beaches, Turks and Caicos has an adaptive scuba certified diver there who will certify you on property. You do have to have medical clearance from your doctor, and then take you diving while you're at the property. And there are other beaches, Club Med Turquoise also does the same thing. And there are other properties around the world that will help you do these things, even if you have a disability. It's absolutely amazing. You don't have to have a passive life because you're in a chair. You can do adventures. We have a company in Africa that does completely accessible travel. In fact, we're planning to go to Africa in 2023. We're taking a small group, going to Kenya, using a company that does completely accessible tours for the entire thing. And I'm so excited. It's been my dream to take our youngest there with his disabilities, but because it's small group travel, they can accommodate those disabilities there. And we can go to Italy. There's a company in Italy that we work with that can do accommodations for accessible travel. How many people really think about Italy even being accessible? I know I don't. When I first think of Italy, the first thing that comes to my mind is not accessibility. The first thing that comes to my mind is old, which means not accessible. Those things are pretty equivalent most of the time. But we can do it. There are things that they're doing. You know, down the streets of Copenhagen, they have added a sidewalk that is smooth so that if you're in a wheelchair, you can get down that sidewalk and it's completely accessible. In Tulum, Mexico, it's a very rustic city, you know, little town really, it's not that big, but it's pretty rustic. The cell phones don't work very well there, nothing works very well, but they have in the middle of their sidewalks, they have these grooves that they put in for the visually impaired so that way they know where they are on the sidewalks. There are places around the world working to improve accessibility and trying to become more friendly to those that are traveling with disabilities. So get out there, make a plan, go, because you can. The Ponant, the cruise ship that I was talking about before, they go all the way to Antarctica in a wheelchair. It wasn't on my radar until I learned about that. But now I want to go because I can. So why not? You know, travel really does just change your perspective on life. And when you travel, when you create those memories, when you do things and you have these experiences, it makes the dark times easier to get through. It makes the times where when I lose an ability or I lose control of myself, I mean, yeah, we'll go there, we'll talk about that. I have accidents because I lose feeling. Knowing that I can get up and go and do things like travel and see amazing things and create those experiences, it gives me these pegs in my mind to reach up and grab onto in those hard moments. And with my kids, with my little one, who we have so many struggles with, he looks forward to traveling so much. And when he gets to have these special experiences, when he gets to travel, you see his face change and he grows so much beyond what anybody ever expected of him. He has a functional IQ of 55, and you know, that's, you know, if you're not familiar, the average IQ is 80 to 120, and so he's a bit subpar there, and he's learned to talk pretty well. He can speak in full sentences now. We have worked with him, and I believe that one of the reasons we have made so much progress with him is because we kicked down doors for him. And one of the ways that we kick down doors for him is by traveling and exposing him to new experiences and teaching him new things and showing him that the world doesn't stop at our doorstep. It's a big world out there, and we have so much to see and so much to experience. But we've got to make the way. We've got to be willing to go. We have to be willing to put up with some inconveniences, and we've got to travel. We've got to get out there. We've got to experience these things so that when we are in our dark moments, when we do have the days where it just feels like nothing is working and our bodies aren't just cooperating and our kid has been screaming for 6 hours and we just are at the ends of our rope, we have something to grab onto to remind us that the world is an amazing place and there is so much more out there than just this little world where we focus on what's broken on ourselves. There's so much more to experience and so much life to live, and we deserve to get to live that life. So I'd love to open up the time to any questions. If you guys have any questions for me, I'd love to hear them. If you're interested in traveling somewhere, we'd love to help you get there. If there's a question about a particular location, if I have the answer, I'll provide it now. If not, I'll get back to you with it. So.
I have a question. Organization called SATH. Is that organization still going? Has it closed? Do you know?
I do not know about. He asked the question about SATH. It's not an organization I'm familiar with. Admittedly, even though I have hearing, I'm almost deaf in my right ear and I have profound loss in my left, it really is something that I need to be researching for myself as well as clients. I'm not super familiar with deaf travel. But it is an area that I am partnering with a couple of other agents who have more experience in that than I do. And I can get you that answer if you want to shoot me an email. We can find out about that organization and any other organizations that might be able to assist with that.
Yeah, that's for, like for airfare,
Oh.
cruises.
Oh, SATH.
For disabled people.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it. It's not part of any of the organizations that it's not listed as a resource on any of the organizations that I'm part of, but I can look into it and see if we can find out about it and put it in our network. So.
Okay.
Yes.
I went to New York.
Oh.
So I went to New York, in Times Square. I had a tour there. And there was different presentations, different discussions, like from the president of CEOs from companies, cruise CEO for airfare, and various tour organizations. And the person went up there to present talked about disabled people who are deaf, who are disabled, and all law enforcement said that they're underserved, but they failed all the deaf, all the disabled. And that's why, with New York, we're talking there about that. They were clueless about someone in the stadium there about who were disabled. They printed an article in the newspaper about that. But the interpreter told me about that later on. There's an article in the paper. So they have voices. We have voices to speak up, and then let them get out there and be listened, be heard.
Well, it's a great point. We are, our community as a whole is underserved in all areas, and particularly since we're talking about travel, very much so in travel. It's very difficult, and especially in the Caribbean and Mexico, et cetera, I believe that even more so than mobility issues or cognitive issues, the deaf community and the visually impaired community are left even more behind than those. But it is something we're working on. I didn't mention earlier, one of the ways that I'm advocating for the disabled in the travel community is we are building a program to teach travel advisors how to book travel, how to qualify a person with a disability, how to qualify the resort to make sure that the traveler's needs are met. And I am working with a couple of agents who are deaf to help me build the unit on deaf travel because, again, that's not an area I'm an expert in yet, but it is something that I'm interested in pursuing. So I agree with you. We're definitely underserved in all areas, and we'll keep the focus on travel here, but we're working very hard to make sure that we're better represented in the travel community. Oh, and there's an area I completely left out when we were talking about cognitive disabilities. I'm going to call on my friend Rose over here. So. Yes, that's a great question, Rose. Thank you. For going to a resort like Beaches, Turks, and Caicos that I know has fabulous accommodations for the disabled, I don't really have a cap on it. We are planning a trip to Beaches, Turks, and Caicos next year, October 6th through 10th. If you're interested in joining us on that, we would love to have you. At the moment, we have 30 rooms blocked. I think that's a decent number of rooms to families. Our goal is to serve 30 families. We do plan, we do have one room where we're bringing for that will be ABA therapists and OTs, 4 more. The resort is certified to work with those who have autism and cognitive disabilities, but we'll be bringing extra support because we do have 30 rooms. So they'll be going through and they'll be there to help out with that. And so I think about 30 rooms is good. If we have more than that, we'll have to bring a second room of support staff so that we have 2 extra rooms of support staff. So the group varies. When we go to Africa, we really don't want to do more than about 15 people because Africa is very much small group travel. So the answer to that is it really depends on where we go. Now that we're getting post-pandemic, Incredible Memories goal is to have 3 curated trips a year that are disability friendly, and there'll be different kinds of experiences. Again, next year we're going to beaches, Turks and Caicos, and we're working on setting up a couple other trips. The following year we'll be going to Africa, and we'll have 2 other trips as well, and all that information will be on our website, and you can take a look at it there. I want to really quickly, since Rose, looking over here at her, reminded me, one of the things that we do, we also rent medical equipment. I don't know if you're aware of that, but travel advisors have connections in different locations where we can rent medical equipment for you. How many of you have had a wheelchair damage when you're flying? That's something that happens pretty regularly. There are companies that we can use to provide you a wheelchair on location so that you can still get around and you can still have your trip without it being completely destroyed by your chair being damaged by the airline. So that's one thing they can provide. We provide oxygen concentrators for those who need oxygen on the airplane. There's quite a list of different equipment. One of the things that we can provide for you, and we have done, I think it's an amazing thing that we have access to, is a safety bed. If you have a child with a cognitive disorder who is an eloper or a runner and gets up in the middle of the night and you need to know that they're safe, we actually rent those safety beds. We can have that sent to you. If you're in Orlando, it gets dropped off at your resort. If you're going somewhere other than Orlando, we can have that safety bed sent to you. And because it's medical equipment, it's not going to count against your luggage allowance on the flight. And you can take that with you because it's completely transportable, and your child can use that when you get to the property. So we have a wide range of equipment. Just talk to me about it, what you might need when you travel, and we can make those arrangements. Yes. Over there in the red shirt. There are companies that are able to accommodate dialysis. In Jamaica, there are several companies that do travel dialysis. There is dialysis at sea, which is on the cruise. It can be very expensive, and your insurance doesn't usually cover it out of the country. The best thing to do if you're on dialysis is to work with your dialysis center at home, to have them, we can provide the names for you and help you locate a facility wherever you're traveling to. And so we can coordinate and help you get that set up, but then you will want to talk to your doctors and have them coordinate with the dialysis center wherever you're traveling to make sure that everybody's on the same page and you're getting exactly what you need. That's a fabulous question, and one we were just discussing this past week in our travel agent forum. So great question.
We actually do home dialysis.
Okay. Oh, perfect.
We do the home dialysis, and we selected that on purpose so that we could travel.
Yes.
And the company is actually very large, and they will actually ship everything
Yes.
that we need to wherever we go.
Absolutely.
So I think really the question is more about, are some of those places suitable for being able to do your own dialysis? Because some places you get to a third world country, and even though you might bring some of your things with you, is it really suitable? Are you going to have, because we camp a lot, so we're
Yeah.
looking for places that we're going to have dedicated electricity.
Yes.
We don't want to depend on the generator, because if there's an issue with the generator, so those things come.
So that one's a really specific question, and it's one we would work with you to make sure that the accommodations are suitable. So That would be like on my intake form, I ask a lot of questions, including what medical equipment do you need to travel with, do you need extra outlets, and all those kinds of things. So, but then at that point, that would be something that we do case by case, depending on where you want to travel. And then we would work with our tour company to make sure that where we're sending you is suitable and that they would be able to accommodate all of your needs that way. But the answer is yes, we're familiar with it. We're familiar with home dialysis. It's just a matter of making sure that as we set up where you want to travel to, we set you up in the appropriate accommodations. So.
Do you have any suggestions for travel vision impairments? I know you kind of addressed the deaf, hard of hearing.
Yes.
We have two legally blind and autistic brother-in-law. So we have multiple things going on in the household, but vision tends to be.
Yeah, vision is hard because again, it's one of those that it does kind of get overlooked, like a lot of these other things, like the hard of hearing and the deaf. But yeah, we have some places that do better than others, and we have a list of those. As I mentioned, I actually found Mexico really tries hard for accommodating, which I was shocked to find that out. And then again, I have a network of agents that I work with, several of them whom are visually impaired, and so we work together and try to do accommodate. I'm not always, I own a company, so I'm not always the one to book your travel. Sometimes if I think somebody else is going to do a better job than I will, I'll pair you with them. For example, I would put you with an agent who has a visual impairment and has more experience with that. But absolutely, we have places that are more friendly than others and can definitely help you with that as well. So, and I'm so sorry, I saw you had your hand up earlier. Did your question get answered?
I was wondering, what kind of things can you do for someone with mental illness? How can you help them with your travel plan?
Well, we help you by we give you resources. A lot of that can be similar. Some of the prep work is the same. Like again, that's one of those things that depends on what your exact needs are. She asked about mental illness. I just had a family who has PTSD pretty badly from all of his military service and some sudden onset medical diagnosis flying. And what we did is we prepared the airline for them. We gave them tools and tips on how to travel with it so that he was better prepared for the flight. We got him bulkhead seating so he had more space in his seat. And we prepare the resort to accommodate as well by sending them a letter letting them know to expect a guest who has some disabilities and to set up a private check-in and to do as much as we can to pave the road, to make it as smooth as possible. We do that for cognitive disabilities too. Send the request for a private check-in so they're not standing there in line after a long, exhausting day of travel at the end of their bandwidth. So we really just try to smooth the way out as best as we can, and we try to accommodate you. We have an intake form for that as well, where we ask you specific questions about what are your triggers, what helps keep you calm, and just various questions to make sure that we know how best we can accommodate you. And it's another one of those that it's going to vary by every person, but the things we definitely do: coordinate with the airline ahead of time, coordinate with the resort ahead of time, coordinate with the tours that you're doing ahead of time. For my families who have disabilities, I find that most of the time doing either very small or private tours is going to be the best option. And so we set up, I have tour operators that I've gotten to know, my guides in Mexico. There's one in particular that I recommend. She's amazing. She is educated on both mental illness and cognitive disabilities, and she's also educated on wheelchair friendliness. So there's a lot that we can do by just knowing about it and being able to kind of pave the way and smooth things out for you as best as we're able to. So, and I know you had another question.
I wanted to add another experience I had. I was traveling with a deaf group. I was kind of the lead for the group at the time, and we were going to Harry Potter. we got there to meet with the group guide and everything, we thought we had everything set up and planned, and there was a mistake. We had a bunch of parents calling me, since I was the lead. They were calling me with all of their issues, and I was then thrown into a position where I couldn't fix anything. I was just leading the group, and I had to find someone who could take care of the kids that were in the group. We didn't know that there were going to be kids there. I was supposed to be just leading adults, I guess, so it led me to build a workshop to kind of teach that issue. Now we have the issue of doing, and most stuff has having to be virtual, but next year we're planning on doing a workshop like that, going to the World Fair, which I would encourage all of you to look into the World Fair.
Yes, Dubai is actually quite accessible. They've done an excellent job with accessibility. I don't know if you guys can hear.
I have been there, and everything is great there. I have been there.
Yeah.
It's very good with mobility too.
Yes, absolutely. So
their technology is just out of this world as well. So that probably helps. And I also noticed captioning in a lot of places.
Yes.
Having the maps, like the apps on your phone, they've got stuff in more of like a universal sign language.
Yeah.
So they're trying really hard to make things accessible, even with GPS, so people know where to go. Just like simple things like finding a bathroom.
Yes.
And finding restaurants. They've got a lot of cool stuff. But the World Fair is really neat at technology and seeing what's available.
So I don't know how many of you are aware, the World Fair is taking place in Dubai, and it's going to be quite a long experience. Dubai has become very, very accessible, and we're really excited about everything that they have to offer. So he's talking about going to the World Fair next year and how accessible it is, and the technology that they've developed to accommodate those with disabilities, not just for the deaf community, but also they do an excellent job with mobility and, did you mention visually impaired?
Yeah, the Olympics too.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, very accessible.
Yes. So there are a lot of
There
different
was a time
options.
where we wanted to go to the Olympics and we weren't able to for one, and we brought it up at the World Fair. But yeah, we were able to go the next time we
That's amazing. I think that's incredible that you've kind of worked towards some of that accessibility, and I would love to get together with you and talk more about that, how you've made strides for the deaf community. I think that's absolutely amazing. Let me get this question back there. We're almost out of time, so.
What restaurants have you found that best suit for food allergies?
So you mean just like local type restaurants? Well, of course, here in Orlando, Disney's restaurants are all incredible. We've had an excellent experience at there. Universal, we don't find as accessible. For large restaurants, one of the ones that we've had a lot of success with is Maggiano's. Even though my daughter can't eat grains and everything, when we go there, particularly in Tampa, one of the chefs there has a sister with over 30 food allergies, so we have had excellent success there. But we've also had success with it in St. Louis. And what we tend to find, and I think this is kind of an unfortunate reality, when you have a disability or a food allergy, you're going to need to expect to pay more because you're going to need better service. So we're looking at more high-end trips. We're looking at higher-end restaurants. I find that I typically look for restaurants where they have a named chef on their website. There's a restaurant called Eulalie in Tampa. It's definitely one of my absolute favorites. I took the president and founder of Travelability there with my family, and he was just tickled to death with how well they took care of my entire family. So it really kind of depends. As far as a brand, a chain restaurant, my favorite is Maggiano's. I think that they are incredible. Then we have also been impressed by a few other places. I think for a quick food, we really do well with Chipotle. They do a good job for us. The other, I'm not really a super fan of a whole lot of other chains. So really, I think when you get to a restaurant, just restaurant tips for food allergies, always talk to the chef. Don't talk to the waiter. You need the chef. You need to tell them, I need the chef to come out and take care of my order because I have a very specific diet. So it's really important that you communicate that up front with the server who comes to your table and say, this is what I need. I know what I need. Please make sure that you meet my need. And I need to talk directly to the chef because I have a very specific diet and I will be sick if we don't take care of my need. All right, let's answer one more question. Then I think our time is up. Well, I'll see if I can get both of you really quick. Yes.
No, I'll just be really quick. My husband works in the restaurant industry, and I want to let you know, just because you had a bad experience at one restaurant doesn't mean don't try it somewhere else. Because, like, my husband works in the restaurant industry, he caters heavier to the disability, and so does everybody else now in that restaurant because they're like, wow, this family has to go through so much. So now everybody in that restaurant kind of understands more. But if you go somewhere else, you're not going to necessarily get the same thing. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get a better service there either.
Absolutely, and that's definitely a good point. We look at a lot of reviews and we try to find things. My son, I don't know, yep, if you guys want to see my boys, they're here today. My daughter had to work, but I'm going to embarrass my son back there. There's the little one and there's the older one. They're standing there in the back. Yay, I'm so happy they made it. So we have definitely found that one of my son's favorite restaurants is Olive Garden. So that's somewhere that we do go occasionally, and we've had great experiences and we've had not so great experiences. So you have to be willing to explore and go out and try things. And I know that's hard when you have allergies and you're either going to be sick or go into anaphylactic shock. You really want to be careful about it. But that's the importance of pushing to talk to the chef and making sure that they understand what will happen if they don't take care of you properly. So that's just something that we really need to make sure. Okay, really quickly, let's see if we can answer you really quick.
One of my biggest struggles with my daughter is wetting the bed at night when we can take her to a hotel, so I bring tons of things from home to try and make that not happen. But how do you address that with the hotel to where I'm not stressing out to take her overnight to Disney or something? I mean, usually we go local, but it's a huge issue with the bed wetting.
Well, I have a little bit of experience with that as well. What we would do is we'd take pads with us, and if you're there 7 nights, you take 7 pads, and you put those on the bed every night. But then you also, you're not the first. It's not the first time. It's not the first time that that's happened. We're talking about Disney. They've had bedwetters. So, stop being embarrassed about it. Honestly, that's my #1 piece of advice. Stop being embarrassed. You're not the first. There's nothing you can do to make it stop. If you could, you would have already. So don't be embarrassed about it. Prepare as best you can. Bring your pads, put them on the bed, and then tip your housekeeper really well. So, yes. Yeah.
The other thing I do is like last night, my son was with us and he went through his diaper a lot. I pre-asked for a set of sheets and a blanket so that I'm not trying to call housekeeping and waiting a half an hour for them to collect the linens up and come on up and change the linens. I don't care, I'll change it myself, it doesn't matter to me, I can get home. I get up,
Yeah.
in 10 minutes, quick change linens, they're already there. That is one thing that helps because you're not waiting for other people to come in and disturb you and then, well, you don't want to be in your pajamas necessarily or whatever. If you already pre-have them there, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
Especially if you know they might do that.
Right. We've done that before in the past, but usually what we would do is just strip the bed in the morning so that it was very clear that we couldn't use those sheets again, and then we'd be gone all day and they would have a fresh bed when we got back to the room. So just being prepared as best you can. accepting it yourself, knowing that it's a possibility that it's going to happen, and doing whatever you can to mitigate it being a huge issue, and having your pads that cover. We had great things that we would put on the bed. They were huge, and they pretty much caught everything. Every now and then they wouldn't, but making sure that we had those resources there to make sure we could take care of it as best we could, and then just letting the rest go. All right, I do have to wrap it up. I'm all the way in the back if you go in the exhibit hall, booth 608 if you need a number. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions. Please be sure to grab our cards, and we'd love for you to join us on our trip. So thank you all for coming. It's been great talking with you. So.